I'd like you to join me in welcoming up on stage Gian Fulgoni, the co-founder and CEO of comScore, who's going to discuss measurement and its role in our continuing relationship and engagement with our audiences.
Thank you.
Gian.
Thank you very much. Good morning. It's great to be here and I appreciate the invitation from the IAB to come and speak with you this morning. Dominique actually set a great foundation for what I want to talk about, which is what we need to do to measure the future of digital in a cross-platform world correctly. And I've always been a believer that the best way to figure out what you need to do in the future is to look at where you've come from and address the issues that one has encountered. So I'm going to start with a little bit of history and then take you into the cross-platform world. If I can get the clicker to move, which I have. So as I was getting ready for this presentation, I came across this cartoon, which I think sums up one of the big issues that, in my opinion, we're facing as an industry, and not just in digital. I think pretty much every industry is facing a problem. I've been in the measurement business now for close to 50 years, and I don't think I've ever seen a situation that's as challenging in measurement terms as what we're facing today. And I think that one of the drivers of the challenge is the speed with which we have to make decisions today. And I think that that speed often leads us down the wrong alley in terms of what we measure and what we believe we're measuring. Another problem that I think we run into, this is a problem I'm running into, is computers. Now, computers are providing us with a lot of solutions, but I think they're also providing us with some challenges, because while digital is the most measurable medium, and I apologize for the problems I'm having here, it's far from perfect. And one of the challenges is that the computers are spitting out so many metrics that it's difficult to really understand which metrics are appropriate, which metrics are correct, and which metrics are maybe misleading. And I think that this challenge is one that, as I said, that has maybe reared its ugly head to a degree that we've never seen before. Apologize for this, but so clicks on ads that have been used as a metric for effectiveness for a long time. These click rates are now dropping to just like 1 in 4 clicks per 1,000 impressions. All right, so these click rates have dropped to virtually nothing. Yet, in a recent survey that I did, of the industry, I found that about a third of advertisers, agencies, and publishers were still using clicks as the key metric to evaluate the effectiveness of their display ad campaigns. And the research that's been done, we've done it, others have done it, has shown that there's basically no correlation of any significance between click rates and effectiveness of campaigns, and yet the industry keeps using it. And I think the only reason I can come up with as to why it still happens is, well, it's either you don't know the results of this research, or you're under such time pressure that it's the easiest, simplest, fastest metric to use. Unfortunately, it's also the wrong metric. Another issue that I wanted to bring up is the use of online survey panels. These are fast, they are inexpensive, and they can be really misleading. And I want to show you some dramatic data in that regard. So I went into the comScore panel that we maintain, 2 million people that we monitor around the world, and we see everything that these people are doing, including all the surveys that they take from any supplier, not just from comScore. So I took all of the people who took surveys and compared them to the people who don't take surveys. And I found that the survey takers are on average 2 to 3 times heavier users of the internet than an average consumer, all right? So if you start asking them questions about cross-platform or cross-channel, you're going to run into a problem. because they are heavier users of the internet, you'll get numbers that overstate the time spent online, and it'll understate the time spent on watching television. These numbers were used by some pretty influential people. Mary Meeker, for example, in her annual report on the industry, on the media industry, was quoting as long as 5 years ago numbers that overstated the degree to which people had moved to digital compared to television. Now here's another even more dramatic number. So if you ask people, how much do you spend online versus in a retail store? This is the kind of overstatement you'll get there. Now, these numbers were published by the National Retail Federation in the US, basically saying around the time of one of the hot shopping seasons in the US, that 42% of all consumer spending that was discretionary was being done online. At the same time, the US Department of Commerce was putting out numbers that said it was 14%. All right? I mean, if the number of 40% was correct, you may as well close a half of the stores in the United States. I mean, it's just not a correct number. It's just an artifact of the people that are being used in the survey. Again, I think the pressure of doing things quickly and inexpensively is what leads to some of the problems. Another issue, and unfortunately, here we are addressing this issue, and Dominique really touched on it. The accuracy of cookie-based targeting leaves a lot to be desired. So here are our benchmark numbers across a variety of European countries. So the percentage of time or the impressions that are being delivered accurately in a targeting sense to the correct demographics is under 50%. So as an ad buyer, if you don't insist on some audience guarantees the way that typically happens, at least in the upfronts in the US, you're just not delivering your ads correctly. Why does this happen? The demographic data attached to these cookies is outdated. The computers are shared. Generally, you have 2 to 3 people on these computers, so you never know if the cookie that's on the machine is really accurately describing the person who's using the computer at the time that the ad is delivered. The registration data sometimes are inaccurate, et cetera. And it just leads to issues that, if we don't address them, means that a half of your ads are being delivered to the inappropriate target. And then you've got this issue. Now, this really has been addressed by the industry, and I think that, as Dominique mentioned, Procter & Gamble was one of the most vocal advertisers in that regard. And that's the issue, whether these ads that are delivered are ever in view to the consumer. To what degree is it not a consumer that's on the other end of that device? To what degree are these ads being delivered to unsafe content? These are all issues that I think, at least here, the industry, I think, is on top of this and is doing a good job. And they have to, because a half of the ads, if you don't address it, a half of the ads that are being delivered pretty much in any country are just not being seen. They're just not in view to a consumer. A portion of it is being delivered to bots. But you have to address it. And when you start getting into the issue, or the issues that are driving the problem, you start to come up with some interesting things. So the viewability rates are significantly higher if you're looking at a campaign that's based on a direct buy. If you're looking at programmatic, especially on the open exchanges, you are really taking your chances as to whether you really are getting your money's worth in terms of what you're spending. And interestingly, but maybe not surprisingly, the problem becomes bigger with video. And as more and more video ads are run online, the problem of invalid traffic or non-human traffic is just going to get bigger and bigger as a challenge unless we do something about it. Now you might ask, well, why are these rates higher? And it's really the CPMs are higher, and so the fraud is chasing the money. It's just like a story back in the US from the 30s. There was a bank robber by the name of Willie Sutton. And somebody asked him one day, well, why do you rob banks, Willie? And he said, well, that's where the money is. That's what's happening here. So we've got to address this issue. Programmatic, as I said, magnifies the problem of viewability, and it magnifies the invalid traffic problem. There is unquestionably now a reaction to this issue where, as I see it, programmatic is now being looked at much more favorably in private exchanges as opposed to the open exchanges, which I think is good news for the premium publishers who can demonstrate much higher levels of viewability on their inventory as opposed to programmatic on an open exchange. So they can get the benefits of programmatic, the efficiencies of computerized buying, but offer the advertiser a greater likelihood of their ads being actually delivered to who they intended it to be delivered to. So I think we're at a point where digital media and the measurement of digital media needs to continue to evolve, and I want to show you some of the things that are happening in that regard. So again, to reinforce what Dominique was saying, the industry is really now beginning to address the issue of focusing on impact and not getting hung up on metrics that are easy to measure but don't reflect necessarily the effectiveness of the campaign. And these are just some of the quotes from some of the leading publications in the US and around the world that are talking about moving beyond the use of viewability metrics as a surrogate for effectiveness. We've tried to address that at comScore, and as some of you might know, if not, happy to say the following to you. We decided to make viewability measurement free. So basically, if you use the comScore VC product for viewability measurement, you don't have to pay for it. And the reason that we're doing that is we think that that will divert the attention away from viewability as an effectiveness metric onto the other metrics that are directly relevant to an advertiser. Unduplicated reach and frequency, GRP measurement. I'm not saying that those are effectiveness measurements, but they certainly are important metrics that you need to have if you're going to evaluate what you delivered in your campaign. I could have put target GRPs up there as well. And then measuring the lift in attitudes and sales. Some of this is going to take a little longer to do, but it's going to give you numbers that I think are more relevant certainly to the advertiser that's spending the money. So that's what we've done, and I hope, certainly based upon the response that we've seen from the industry, which has been enormous, I think we're offering the appropriate service, if you will, and capability that the industry needs. Let me then, having covered some of the things that have happened in the past, let me shift to what I think is likely to be of importance to the industry in the future, in this cross-platform world that we're already living in. This is really important. We have to measure the unduplicated audience. We can't simply count the siloed number of viewers or visitors in each platform, add them up, and think that that gives you the total audience and the total audience reach. For some of the people are going to be consuming content across devices, so measuring unduplicated audience across platforms at a granular level is important, and in a variety of countries around the world, this is beginning to happen. A lot more work to be done. But basically, what this allows an agency and the advertiser to understand is how does that unduplicated audience build across platforms. This is the series finale from a very, very popular network show that ran in the US. And we're looking at the incremental audience for all persons and then for people 18 to 34 across the platform so that you can see how your cumulative reach builds and how it builds by platform and how it builds by demographic. So you have to, in the ideal world, you have to be able to measure this type of unduplicated audience at the granular level of a platform and a show. That puts pressure on sample sizes, but it's certainly doable. How important is this? Okay, here's Erwin Gottlieb, chairman of the largest media buying agency in the world, and this is what he said. We have to get better at cross-platform measurement, better at the deduplication. We need to understand how much reach we obtain on a campaign across devices. And then this is important. With the availability of cross-platform data that allows improved media planning, I believe ad spending will increase across all platforms, including television. Now, he said this at a client event that we ran in the US, and I was doing a fireside chat with him, and I asked him, well, why do you think that that's going to happen? And he said, look, if I have the right data, I can put together a media plan that I can more effectively sell to my client. And if I can sell it more effectively, they're going to spend more money, and the result is that we're going to see ad spending increasing across all platforms. So I look at this, if it's correct, and Irwin has rarely been wrong in my experience, this is really pretty important, and I think is very positive for the entire industry. Okay, another issue, and this one doesn't get a lot of attention. I think it's going to get a lot more in a cross-platform world. Effective frequency capping across platforms. Now, frequency capping exists. Does it work? Let you be the judge. So this is the distribution of impressions that we see across many, many campaigns in terms of the numbers here, the percent of impressions, and then the percent of people that are getting that percent of impressions. And basically what you're seeing is at the low frequency level, 1 to 2, you got a lot of people falling into that bucket, more than you need. And if you go to the top end, you have a massive over-delivery, where you've got something like less than 1% of the people are getting a third of all the impressions. This is in a single platform world. In a cross-platform world, if we're not able to measure that consumer across all devices, frequency capping is going to become a bigger and bigger problem. Why does this exist? Maybe the frequency capping is being disabled. Maybe the visitation rates to individual sites and the frequency of visitation is not enough to deliver the kind of capping that's required. But this is what we typically see. And then if you look at the response, here point lift in a brand metric, could be purchase intent, awareness, actual buying, and you look at that as a function of the impressions delivered, what you see is that you have to deliver in digital somewhere around 20 impressions. It could be that some of these impressions are non-viewable, but in this particular study, we took out all of the non-viewable impressions, so that's not driving this. But maybe it's clutter, but you have to deliver a lot of impressions. You know, there's a number that's quoted often in television that the optimal level of frequency is somewhere around 3 to 4. This is saying that in digital, you got to deliver a lot more to get the same kind of impact. Again, these numbers are from a single platform. In a cross-platform world, it's going to be an even bigger challenge, and I think it's something that the industry is going to have to address. And here are the implications. Frequency caps from 20 to 50 are appropriate for most brands, at least in the single platform world. Exposures above these thresholds are at best wasted. The marginal contribution of incremental exposure declines quickly and loses over 90% of its effectiveness even earlier. And if you're talking about on video or pop-up ads, those kind of things that are more interruptive, you likely don't have to deliver as many impressions. But I think there's a lot of work to be done here in this particular area. All right, here's another one. Aligning the metrics between television and digital video. All right, television is used to using an average minute audience. It's not what the digital video folks are using, and I think the comparison then becomes problematic. Because if you compare the average minute TV audience versus the number of digital video viewers, they are just totally inconsistent metrics. And I think we need as an industry to do a better job of using metrics that are consistent across platforms. This one, I guarantee you, will become, if it's not already, a big, big deal. Another one, social. Obviously, as you saw again from Dominique's numbers, a lot of money is flowing into social. I am a judge on an annual social media contest that WARC runs in Europe. And so I see in each year, I see somewhere around 40 campaigns that use social, and I'm astounded by the creativity, first of all. It's really impressive. But I'm also astounded with some of the simplistic assumptions that are made about the reach of these campaigns, where the number of followers are simply added up without any attention being paid to the degree to which you're talking about the same people and counting the same people 10 or 20 times. So we've got to improve this measurement of reach on social media. And then finally, we got to make sure that we're measuring the effectiveness of these campaigns. Some of the early work here is rather encouraging. And I just want to show you 2 slides, and then I'll wrap up. All right, so this is some work that we've done in the consumer packaged good industry, looking at the impact of digital campaigns compared to television. And we're looking at the sales lift in retail stores. So the campaign is running either digitally or on television. If you look at non-targeted digital campaigns, on average, in consumer packaged goods, they'll generate a sales lift of about 4%. So there's non-targeted, no attention paid to viewability, no attention paid to whether or not the ads reach the right target segment. If you address those issues, you can almost double that sales lift. That's how important addressing these issues is for the digital industry. And it increases to a level of just under 7% in a 3-month period. And I compared it to what television is able to generate over a 12-month period. And the level there is an 8 on average. These are averages, and obviously there's a variance around it. On average, it's about 8%. So if we address these issues of viewability and targeting accuracy, we can use digital to get, in a shorter time period, as much of a sales lift as you typically have been able to get with television. All right? And I'm not suggesting that you use one platform at the expense of the other. And I want to leave you with some really interesting work that the Advertising Research Foundation did, where they looked at some metadata covering hundreds of campaigns, where they were looking at the ROI that you could get from the campaigns if the campaign was running on television only, television and print, television and radio, and television and digital. And you can see that running a campaign on TV and digital will boost your ROI by about 60%. And I think that this talks to the reality and the very attractive reality of advertising in a cross-platform world. If you have the right data, if you have the unduplicated audience data, you can really assemble a media plan where you are effectively reaching and efficiently reaching the particular target segment that you're after. I think I'll say and predict that attribution measurement is going to be one of the hottest topics in the industry, if it's not already. So here's a summary. This is my last slide. This is what I think we need to pay attention to. I'm not saying there aren't other issues, but to me, these are some of the biggest ones. Measurement of unduplicated audiences across platforms, effective frequency capping across platforms, aligning the metrics between television and digital video, making sure that we are really measuring the unduplicated reach of social appropriately, and measuring campaign effectiveness using you've got to have all the data. You've got to be doing the attribution measurement appropriately. And then I'll leave it with the last point, which is the cooperation of the industry. And maybe there I'm talking about the walled gardens more than anything else. And I think it's very beneficial and important that it seems to me that both Google and Facebook are beginning to cooperate with the third-party measurement companies in an increased manner that I think can only be beneficial for the industry. But that has to continue. And I'll just then echo the opening comments here for this conference, that this is an industry challenge that if we all work together, we can address. If we don't, though, I think as Mark Pritchard from Procter said, we're going to be facing some challenging headwinds. So I think the future is in our hands, and I think if we embrace the challenge, we will do quite well as we have in the past. So those are my comments. Thank you, and appreciate the time.